mean, you think about it. How can the preacher in the deep south of the United States move into a state of religious faith and drink strychnine and have no biological effects? Or the mother whose child is trapped under the car, who lifts up the car and pulls the child out. The mother doesn't say, geez, I didn't work out in 2 weeks, or God, I ate carbohydrates yesterday. She's not in any polarized state. She moves into a state of absolute certainty. And it's energy that lifts that car up, because energy is the epiphenomenon of matter. And when she makes that change internally, her body is literally responding to a new mind. So then in order for us to change our beliefs about spirituality, about money, about God, about relationships, we have to come out of our resting state, and the experience inwardly has to be transcendent or greater than any past experience. And that's when biology begins to change. People live the majority of their life in familiar feelings. You wake up in the morning as Ben, you look over at your wife and you remember your wife. That begins to fire certain circuits in your brain. You have certain feelings for her based on past experiences. And you lay in bed and you think about all the things you have to do and all the problems you have. And every one of those thoughts begins to produce a certain emotion, and you start to reaffirm your identity. You get up, you look at the dresser your grandmother gave you, you unconsciously perceive it as something. Then you go to the bathroom, you use the toilet, you think of a cup of coffee, you get a cup of coffee, then you go back into the bathroom, you take a shower, you dress, and then you go back and check your emails. You have this certain routine that you do. And because those familiar emotions ground us in our identity, then the moment we are feeling the same way every single day, then all of a sudden we begin to live life from particular biology. Okay? And so then you start thinking about all the knowns you have to do in your life, all the people you have to see, the places you have to go, the things you have to do at very specific times. And you anticipate the feeling of every single one of those events. You start to think about how they're going to feel. Oh, I got to see that person, oh, I got to do that thing, I got to go shopping, I got to do this. And the reason that you are having a thought that's producing an emotion means you can predict that future, and you're going to know how it's going to feel. So if you can predict the future event and you know how it's going to feel, then it means nothing new can happen in your life, because a new experience should have a new emotion. So people unconsciously begin to select knowns in their life, and they begin to emotionally embrace it, and what they're doing is they're limiting their possibilities. So it limits the amount of room for the unknown or the uncommon to happen in their life, because their body's programmed into a predictable future based on the emotions and memories of the past. So then, certain things in our life bring pleasure. You start thinking about a cup of coffee, or seeing your new puppy, or coming home and seeing your wife, or whatever it is. You select that thought in your mind. And if there's a reward that goes along with it, something that's going to feel good, the amazing effect is that your brain begins to produce the exact chemicals in anticipation of that event. So your body is beginning to anticipate or expect that future, and your body's preparing itself for that event. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, because you're anticipating the reward. But the antithesis begins to become a problem. When you're thinking about going to work and sitting next to the coworker you judge and hate, when you're thinking about waking up in the morning and you got to look for your pain in your back, and there it is because you look for it. You have a deadline for something that's taking all of your time and energy. People have certain problems in their life that have emotional correlations. So then as they begin to look at those issues and things in their life based on the knowns, they begin to create the very emotions that keep them enslaved to the past experiences, and reality stays exactly the same. So if feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences, and you can remember experiences better because you can remember how they feel, and those emotions are familiar, it tells us two things. Number one, Nothing new is happening in your life. And number two, if you can't think greater than how you feel, or feelings have become the means of thinking, then you are literally thinking in the past. And your life is going to reflect that. So then getting people to begin to change that from the old self to the new self really requires a tremendous amount of awareness. And that's where my work comes into play. According to the psychological and scientific model, the majority of people in their waking day, in a normal day, spend about 70% of their time living in stress. And living in stress is living in survival. And the actual definition of stress is when your body's knocked out of homeostasis. Stress is when your body's knocked out of balance. The stress response is what your body innately does to return itself back to order. You have three types of stress. You have physical stress, like trauma, injuries, accidents, falls. You have chemical stress, like bacteria, viruses, blood sugar levels, heavy metals in food, hangovers, whatever. And you have emotional stress, like traffic jams, internet connections, second mortgages, single parenting, 401ks, family tragedies. All of those things knock the brain and body out of balance. Now, all organisms in nature can adapt to short-term stress. A pack of coyotes chases a deer in the forest. The deer outruns the coyotes. The stress is over. The deer returns back to homeostasis and it grazes again. The event is over. When the deer perceives a threat in its external environment, it turns on a primitive nervous system called the fight or flight nervous system. And that autonomic nervous system, that sympathetic nervous system, begins to mobilize enormous amounts of energy for some threat in the external environment. Now, deer has all its physiology changed, all the blood is sent to the extremities, heart rate increases, respiratory rate increases, pupils dilate. The 1,300 chemicals that are created in a matter of seconds is to cause the deer to survive in some difficult condition. Now, human beings have the same mechanisms, and when we perceive a threat in our external environment, like a lion, we are going to run or fight or freeze. But if you've had problems with your coworker, or you've had a very difficult experience with your mother-in-law, the moment you perceive your mother-in-law or your coworker, you have a past experience with them, you're going to turn on the same primitive nervous system just like you're being chased by a lion. So what was once highly adaptive now becomes very maladaptive, because when you're mobilizing all of that energy, you are going to operate in very predictable ways. You're going to be an amped up animal with a big memory bank. So that your blood flow is going to go to the hindbrain and away from the forebrain, which means you're going to react instead of think, rationalize. But human beings, the privilege of being a human being is that we can make thought more real than anything else. That's the privilege. So then you can begin to forecast some future worst case scenario. And you can attend to that thought to the exclusion of everything else. And you can focus on it to such a degree that you will begin to anticipate the event and produce the same chemicals as if you were in that experience, and you're knocking your brain and body out of balance just by thought alone. You can begin to unfold some past bitter memory that's tattooed in the recesses of your gray matter, and like magic you can bring it to life, and in that moment it's real. And you will produce the same chemistry in your brain and body as if that event occurred. And your body, as the unconscious mind, is literally living that experience.
don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make.
Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh yeah, I rap with a certainty, I have a sense of urgency. A message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with, now they looking nervously. And I don't really care what you think of me, respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better, see. I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. I got the motherfucking recipe, I've been cooking up hits, I'ma leave a legacy. You'll be looking small when you're standing right next to me. I'm 5'10", bitch, but I'm 10 feet.
Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make.